Section 1. The first main point for us to consider is employee hygiene and sickness. Food employees should always have on clean, appropriate uniforms and workwear. This includes proper shoes, clean aprons, clean hair, and an overall clean and presentable appearance. Fingernails and hands should also be clean, and proper hand washing is critical for the food employee. Food employees should also avoid working when they are sick, and any open cuts or wounds need to be covered or bandaged and gloves need to be worn. Food employees should report any illness to the person in charge, and employees should always try to maintain good health. Avoiding unsanitary habits and actions are also an important part of good hygiene. To maintain personal cleanliness, food employees should bathe regularly before work, trim any long or unruly fingernails, and arrive to work with clean hair and clothes. This will not only ensure a professional and appropriate appearance, but will also be an important part of avoiding cross-contamination. If you wear dirty clothes or come to work with dirty hands, you may spread the bacteria that you brought from the outside of your workplace into an area where food is being prepared and served. If the bacterium that has brought in from your clothes or hands contaminates someone's food, it can cause serious illness. Proper work attire includes wearing a hair restraint such as a hairnet, removing aprons when you leave the food preparation areas, removing excess jewelry from hands and arms, and storing personal items in a designated area away from the food preparation. Flip-flop sandals and other open-toed shoes should be avoided while working in any kind of food preparation or in serving areas. As for hygienic hand practices, we have already mentioned keeping hands and nails clean and short. We have also mentioned that cuts or wounds on the hands must be bandaged and covered with gloves. It is also important that artificial nails and nail polish are not worn while working. Jewelry with ridges or stones should not be worn. Bacteria from the food you may be handling can become stuck in the small ridges and spaces in jewelry, which could create a cross-contamination situation. A smooth, easily cleanable band is the only approved jewelry to wear while working with food. Proper hand washing is one of the most important jobs you have as a food employee. Proper hand washing habits will keep you, the food you are preparing and serving, and your customers safe. Proper hand washing begins with turning on warm water and wetting your hands. Then use soap and wash and scrub your hands for about 15 seconds with the soap lather. Rinse your hands until all the soap is gone, then dry your hands thoroughly with a paper towel or an air dryer. Finally, turn off the faucet with a paper towel to avoid contamination. The entire process should take you around 20 seconds to complete. Safe food employees always wash their hands when they enter and exit a food prep area and before they return to the kitchen from breaks or restroom breaks. Safe food employees wash their hands between preparing raw foods such as raw meat and ready-to-eat foods such as veggies, fruits, and bread. Safe food employees shall wash their hands any time that they become soiled. We will discuss some other scenarios where hand washing is appropriate later in the course. In the following example, we will be using a fluorescent powder to demonstrate the importance of proper hand washing. This product is a white powder that is applied to the hands to represent contaminants and bacteria on the hands. Under a UV light, the powder will glow a yellowish light if it is not removed properly. The powdery substance can be successfully removed through proper hand washing. In this example, we will examine what happens when you do not use correct hand washing procedures. As we have already mentioned, the fluorescent powder product in this case will represent germs or contaminants on the hands. In the first image, we see dry, unwashed, contaminated hands. The fluorescent powder product has not yet been added. In the second image, we see the dry, unwashed hands again, but this time the fluorescent powder product has been rubbed between the unwashed hands, and we are observing them under UV light. As you can see, the fluorescent powder is visible on the hands. The fluorescent powder in this image represents the germs, bacteria, or other contaminants on the hands. In the next image, we can see that the food employee is washing his hands. If the food employee has properly washed his hands, we should not see any of the germs or contaminants that are represented by the fluorescent powder product once we view them under the UV light. In this image, we see the food employee's washed hands. They appear to be clean and no obvious debris or germs seem to be present. Most people would probably say that his hands are clean. In our final image, we can see that under the UV light, there still seems to be some of the fluorescent product on the food employee's washed hands. This indicates the food employee missed areas of his hands while washing them. This means that proper hand washing did not occur and that his hands are not, in fact, clean. This is a great example of why taking the time to properly wash your hands is so important as the food employee. As we have discussed, there are many ways in which cross-contamination can occur, but more often than not, the contamination occurs because of bad food handling habits. These habits include things like scratching your head or body while prepping or serving food, wiping your nose or face, sneezing or coughing, and even smoking or spitting in the food areas. A good example of a bad habit causing contamination is the use of a cell phone. Most everyone today has a cell phone of some type, and most everyone takes their cell phone with them wherever they go. This includes areas like restrooms. When a food employee takes their cell phone into restroom facilities and touches the phone, they transfer bacteria to the phone's surface. The food employee then finishes up and practices proper hand washing before returning to the kitchen. However, after returning to the kitchen and prepping food for lunch, the same food employee then pulls out the cell phone and begins to use it. See the problem? Even though the food employee practiced proper hand washing before returning to the food service area, the phone still has the bacteria from the restroom and other areas. So, when the food employee touched the phone, cross-contamination occurred. If the food employee continues to work with the food after touching the cell phone without first washing their hands, there's a good chance that the food they are now preparing is contaminated. It is the food employee's responsibility to report any illnesses they may have to the certified food manager or person in charge. Every food service establishment must have an employee health policy that determines what must be done when an illness is reported. The employee health policy will help you determine what to do when a food employee reports an illness. The actions that need to be taken will depend on what type of population you are serving. You will either be serving a highly susceptible population or the general population. Highly susceptible populations include people who are more prone to experience foodborne illnesses. This population can include immune-compromised people, preschool-aged children, older adults obtaining food at a facility that provides services such as custodial care, health care, or assisted living, such as a child or adult daycare center, kidney dialysis center, hospital or nursing home, or socialization services such as senior centers. To restrict an employee means to limit the activities of a food employee so that there is no risk of transmitting a disease that is transmissible through food and the food employee does not work with exposed food, clean equipment, utensils, linen, or unwrapped single-service or single-use articles. To exclude an employee means to prevent a person from working as an employee in a food establishment or entering a food establishment as an employee. Here we see a decision tree, similar to one you would find in an employee health policy, which will tell you if an employee needs to be restricted or excluded. If the employee is reporting symptoms, you will then find what symptoms the employee is experiencing and see if the decision tree requires that the employee be excluded or restricted. In some situations, you will need to take into account whether or not you are serving a highly susceptible population in order to decide when to exclude versus restrict an employee. For example, if an employee is experiencing symptoms of vomiting, diarrhea, or jaundice, which is the yellow appearance of eyes and skin, the employee shall be excluded. Here we can see a list of the 6 big reportable diseases. If you are a food employee that has been diagnosed with a foodborne illness caused by Salmonella typhi, Salmonella non-typhi, Shigella species, Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, Hepatitis A virus, or Norovirus, then you should report to your person in charge immediately. The person in charge will work with the health department to determine if you will need to be excluded or restricted and when you will be able to return. As we have discussed previously, Hepatitis A is one of the big 6 reportable diseases. We have noticed an influx of Hepatitis A cases which can affect food employees. To reduce your risk of contracting Hepatitis A, you should always practice proper hand washing and good hygiene, and be sure to get vaccinated against the hepatitis virus. Food employees must also report to the person in charge if they have been exposed to or are the suspected source of a confirmed disease outbreak with Norovirus within the past 48 hours of their last exposure, Shiga toxin-producing E. coli or Shigella species within the past 3 days, Salmonella typhi within the past 14 days of the last exposure, or Hepatitis A within the last 30 days of the last exposure. Remember that the decision trees that are found in your employee health policy will help you determine whether an ill employee should be restricted or excluded. For more detailed information on employee health or for a copy of the FDA Employee Health and Personal Hygiene book, visit the link below or contact your local health department.